Good morning, evening and afternoon. Today is Wednesday, so we have gotten our reset for the start of Season 4 in Europe as well, so people are gonna be busy today playing the new season, which means I am going to be brief in this video. We have to go over, as it has now been a custom for the alpha, every reset more or less we are getting a new release of talent trees for Dragonflight, and this week has been the time for Warrior. Also, we have gotten some changes to the tree of Shaman, and we have also gotten some more data mining to the spells. This time the data mine spells are for Warlock, so perhaps they are getting data mined into the alpha build because they will be the next class to be revealed perhaps next week. This is what we are working for now. Let's go over first, before even getting into the actual new talent tree, which is Warrior, is the data mining of Warlock. There isn't too much data mining, to be honest. There is essentially nothing about Destro, there is very little about Affliction, and a little bit more about Demonology. We have far more data mining regarding the general class 3 of Warlock. Now, in this class 3, there isn't really anything too surprising or anything too crazy, okay? We are not seeing any super powerful or surprising changes to the general tree available, giving some talents or some passives or some abilities to all 3 Warlock specs. There is the teachings of the Black Harvest for your pet usable ability empowerments, which is interesting but not really that powerful for most of these effects. Perhaps the only meaningful addition is the change of Soul Conduit being now a passive available to all 3 Warlock specs at the quite nerfed rate. Soul Conduit is that chance to refund one of your spent soul shards that is currently available as a talent to Warlocks. Currently all 3 of the Warlock specs have Soul Conduit across all of their talent trees, so it makes sense that this is moved into the general tree so that all 3 Warlock specs can pick it back up, even though it has been nerfed basically by 50% compared to what it is currently in Shadowlands. I guess the bigger data mining comes from Demonology. Now, there isn't really any like super powerful, very new addition to Demo, especially if you were one of the more heavy on Hopium type of players who were hoping and waiting to get something like Metamorphosis back for Demonology. Not really at the moment. There hasn't really been too much data mined besides, you know, standard passive damage increases or some proc effects. You do have the knowledge with this data mining that your Felguard will still be your main pet in Dragonflight, and that things like Hand of Gul'dan to generate imps as well as Dreadstalkers as your pets will still be a thing in Dragonflight, and your main default, I guess, rotation, your default build will still be about these pets, so to speak. So that is perhaps the biggest news about the data mining that happened for Warlock. However, we do have something much more clear than just data mining, because we have the full set of talents for Warrior that were shown to us in this reset and in this new build of the alpha. So the first thing to point out is that at the moment the most promising, the most surprisingly good type of talent tree is for Protection Warrior. If I had to rate all 3 of the specs of Warrior, I would say Prot is the one that looks the coolest in terms of choices. I guess possibilities is the one that looks the best. What perhaps might not excite too many of you is that even though it looks the best, the way in which it looks the best is by significantly empowering your Thunderclap. Perhaps we will see in Dragonflight, perhaps even back to BFA levels of empowerment of Thunderclap, because one of the standouts of this general tree for Warrior is the return of Unstoppable Force, which is now a choice between Signet of Tormented Kings, your currently very popular, it has been throughout the expansion more or less, legendary for all 3 specs, and Unstoppable Force, which is your avatar increases the damage of Thunderclap by 50% and reduces its cooldown by 50%, which was one of the main culprits of creating the abomination of BFA Protection Warrior, spamming Thunderclap non-stop. This power comes with several other empowerments to Thunderclap. One of the surprises, which is going to be a new ability available to your warrior, amongst many of these returning effects, of course, like your stances, your intervenes, your rallying cries, your heroic leaps and spell reflex and whatnot. One of the non-returning ones, but completely brand new, is Blood and Thunder. Increases the damage of Thunderclap flat out by 10%, which is good if you are planning to spam this thing, but more importantly, whenever you Thunderclap a target affected by your Rend, you also affect 5 nearby targets with Rend. So this is a very powerful damage increase and spreading of Rend to all enemies, which is going to come very in handy when you go in Mythic Plus. In the protection tree itself, there are further ways to make your Thunderclap spam even stronger, like the returning Thunderlord, making your Thunderclap get further cooldown reduction to your demoralizing shout, and then taking Booming Voice to make you do 20% more damage inside Demo Shout, as well as other returning effects like Into the Fray to give you basically 10% haste in every single pack of trash mobs in Mythic Plus, and another new effect which is going to come very in handy, which is Blood Surge. Blood Surge makes your periodic bleed effects, which of course include Rend, have a chance to grant you 5 rage. So spreading Rend to like 10 targets immediately by using a couple of Thunderclaps very close to each other gets you a lot of chances to generate rage. Talking about new flashy stuff though, not just the returning effects. We have one returning effect which is worth pointing out, which is the Covenant ability. Out of everything available for Warrior, you have one returning Covenant ability, which is right here. You might have seen the icon already, Spear of Bastion, which comes back, and it is also supported by its Covenant legendary effect, which is Elysian Might. It is pretty much unchanged, it's still there. It comes with a choice now. It's not just Elysian Might, it is also Piercing Verdict, which makes you get more insta damage and rage regen in the initial use of the spear, rather than Elysian Might. You have some other effects here at the end, like Rumbling Hurt to make you get Shockwave, empowered Shockwave effect, and Thunderous Aftershocks to empower your Thunderous Roar, which is now an option. It's quite interesting. Another interesting thing is that now you can take Stormbolt. Between Titanic Throw and Stormbolt, now you have your single target stun right here, very handy, very easy to reach, right? Because you're gonna be going down this path anyways. Stormbolt is not gonna be that annoying to reach, right below Thunderclap as well, so you get your single target stun right here. Another interesting change, however, rather than returning effects, is going to be Outburst. Consuming 30 rage grants a stack of Seeing Red, which is going to transform at not 1 stacks, I think it used to be 8 stacks, I don't know what number is going to be now. It's going to transform into Outburst, causing your next Shield Slam or Thunderclap to be 200% more effective and grant Ignore Pain. Ignore Pain is going to be quite powerful, it looks like, not just this effect, but also possible effects like something like this one, Brutal Vitality. A percentage of the damage you deal is added to your active Ignore Pain shield, for example. Looks quite good. All in all, protection with all of these returning power-ups, especially centering around Thunderclap, looks quite promising. Where we start getting not, like, I'm not saying they are bad, okay, these other two ones for Arms and Fury, they're not nearly as bad as many of the other more disappointing talent trees, like Feral Druid, like Shadow Priest, like the Hunters, which have been very often updated and upgraded by Blizzard. There are, however, a few points of concern with the 2 DPS trees of Warrior. The main point that we have to go and talk immediately is that Warrior, specifically Arms, gets one of the other many, at this point, introduced party buffs in the talents. The party buff of Warrior was something that was datamined a few days ago, and now we know that it's in the Arms tree, which is Skull Banner. Skull Banner used to be in the game quite a few years ago. This is the effect that is going to be increasing the critical strike damage by 20% for party members for 10 seconds. So it is a decent damage increase, of course, in particular for burst. Imagine putting an Arms Warrior, perhaps not very happy because he won't be in a melee group, he won't be in a Wind Fury group, but if you put this in a group of Fire Mages who use Combustion and have guaranteed crit, This skull banner effectively means your fire mages will be doing 20% more crit, because inside combustion they always crit, which makes skull banner incredibly powerful for a mage group, for example. Now, where do we have a problem? We have a problem because this might replicate an issue that we looked for rogues. When you look at Rogue, you have Assassination Rogue, which has Atrophic Poison, which is a 3% less damage done by the enemy, which is a raid buff, essentially. It's going to be as good, in fact better, if you take Master Poisoner, than Devotion Aura of Paladin. So this is going to be very powerful and almost a mandatory one spot in the raid for your Rogue. You also have Outlaw. Outlaw with its... where is it? Restless Crew, giving you cooldown reduction to your strongest offensive cooldown to your party members. That's also going to perhaps guarantee a spot. This means that, okay, fine, Assassination and Outlaw are doing quite well, but then Subtlety gets cucked, because Subtlety has nothing. We are seeing something similar with Arms and Fury, because while Arms is getting Skull Banner, what is Fury getting? Nothing. Fury is not getting a single party or raid buff whatsoever. So that might create quite the gap between Fury and Arms, especially if they're, if they're sims right as we get into the last few weeks of the beta and the sims are going to start coming out. People will already have started to, to theory craft the best possible builds and whatnot. And the difference between Fury and Arms is not that far apart. Then Fury is going to lose automatically because Fury does not have Skull Banner. That is currently the main concern amongst the two different DPS specs of Warrior. If I had to look at the highs and the lows of these two DPS specs, however, for the lows of Arms, I would have to say their main issue, their main issue that they have had pretty much at this point as spec identity is the fact that they still don't really have any meaningful, any powerful AoE. This is going to continue in Dragonflight. They do get Bladestorm with a few supporting talents, but besides that you have the usual Dreadnought, okay, to make your overpower splash around, but that's about it. They don't really get anything particularly powerful. You do have access, of course, to Sweeping Strike, which is the exact same as what you have now, but there isn't really any supporting talent to make Sweeping Strikes stronger. This one, for example, is extremely weak. Having a choice talent, which usually we have seen being something like a legendary effect, an old talent, an old Azerite trait, in this case is Sweeping Strikes last 2 seconds longer, which is just pitiful. So this is definitely still the weak point of Arms Warrior so far. The high point, I guess the surprising thing, the interesting thing is something that we talked about when we looked at the data mining of these abilities, which is Fatality. Your multi-strike abilities against enemies above 30% health have a very high chance to apply Fatality. When an enemy falls below 30% health, your next execute will inflict an additional 100% attack power per stack of Fatality. So we compared this a few days ago to the Ink Pod trinket of Orgozoa in Eternal Palace for the massive amount of damage it was going to do. So it's going to be quite the special effect given to Arms Warrior in Dragonflight. Now, looking at Fury instead, when it comes to the highs and the lows of Fury, honestly, Fury doesn't really have too many lows. It has been one of the more, I guess, praised type of specs for melee in terms of engagement, in terms of how enjoyable it is to play, how fluid it is, how fast it gets, right? It's not usually one of the more complained about specs when it comes to melee DPS, right? So I didn't find anything too bad in this Fury Talent Tree at first glance, at the very least. Still, if I had to look at the low of Fury Warrior, would have to be the fact that they are losing Bladestorm in the next expansion. They got access to Bladestorm finally, but now they don't have access to it anymore. So perhaps their burst damage, their burst AoE damage is going to be losing out a little bit. They have access to a few other effects that they can now take in combination that they previously couldn't. Odin's Fury is back for Fury Warrior. You can take Onslaught as a talent which is now available right here, together with something like Siegebreaker as well, to be able to be taken at the same time, together with, of course, Ravager, which is still remaining in the game, even though you lose the opportunity to take Blazestorm as a Fury Warrior. In the high highs of this talent tree is still the good rotation around your Rampage, which is still there in Dragonflight. Blizzard is not risking too many changes to the rotation of Fury Warrior with their core Rampage rotation, so it is still very likely going to remain there and mostly unchanged. So that's positive, considering how many people were, I guess, praising the current version of Fury Warrior. So I don't see why we would need to change the Fury Warrior build too much. So this is what we have as a whole for the moment. The slight changes to the talents, I guess positioning of Shaman, the datamining of Warlock, and then finally the new talents of Warrior, which at the moment, as I said, my main concern is once again yet another party buff given to only one of the DPS specs of an entire class, which might come up to become a problem in the future. Perhaps also because of the positioning in the talent tree of arms, Skull Banner won't be as powerful as some of the other party buffs, but still, it is once again another risk, okay, another unnecessary risk that we might have in Dragonflight, where certain specs will be taken over others of their same class simply because they were given a party buff that the other spec in the same class did not get, which I think would just be quite unfair, right? Quite unnecessary. You might as well have put this in the general tree of Warrior rather than giving it to a single one and be done with it. But let's just hope it won't turn into too massive of a drama, and even if it did, let's just hope Blizzard won't resolve this like they did with things like Covenants, meaning it's gonna take them more than a year to fix the issue. Let's just hope that even if it does become an issue, they will be much faster in fixing it in Dragonflight. So for today, I have to stop because I have to go and start doing some Mythic Plus before getting into the raid tonight. So thank you, of course, guys, for all of my supporters on Patreon, for supporting the channel, myself, my family, and all of the pets I keep in my apartment. It is always nice to know, as we get deeper into the content of Dragonflight, that I have your support as I continue to produce and deliver content to you. Also, to further support the channel, you can like and comment down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, which is always kind of the end goal of a YouTube channel. And finally, for further imaginary best friend behavior, you can support me by following on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right down at these links. With all of this social crap being done with, it's time to leave. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, oh my god, I just forgot. I was excited about spamming some Mythic Plus, and then I just realized the amount of people who will have no idea what to do in Karazhan and in Mechagon. Oh lord.